before Babylon appears as a symbol in prophecy, before it becomes a warning in later religious memory, it is first a city of dust, water, brick, heat, and human labor. In about 570 BC, under Nebuchadnezzar II, Babylon stands near the height of its power. The Euphrates runs through it like an artery. Canals branch from the river, carrying life into fields, workshops, courtyards, and temple districts. Date palms rise along the banks. Boats move where roads do not. Mud, shaped by hand and dried by the sun, has become walls, houses, storehouses, shrines, and administrative rooms. The city does not float above the earth in legend. It is fastened to the plain of southern Mesopotamia, where every harvest depends on water that must be measured, guided, defended, and shared. To approach Babylon from a distance is to understand why ancient writers remembered it with awe. The southern Mesopotamian landscape is broad and open. The horizon often seems empty until a city announces itself by geometry. Then walls appear. Towers interrupt the line of the sky. Temple structures rise above the lower mass of homes and workshops. What nature has not lifted, kings and workers have built. Babylon is not dramatic because it sits on a mountain or clings to a cliff. It is dramatic because people made a plain speak the language of power. By the 6th century BC, this city carries the inheritance of an old civilization. Sumerian, Akkadian, Assyrian, and Babylonian traditions lie behind its public life. Empires have risen and broken in Mesopotamia before Nebuchadnezzar was born. Cities have boasted before. Kings built before. Yet Babylon gathers old streams into a new center. Its scribes preserve texts older than the empire itself. Its priests serve gods, whose names have sounded in the land for many centuries. Its rulers inherit the political habits of the Near East: conquest, tribute, diplomacy, forced labor, royal display, and the constant need to prove that order still holds against chaos. The city's greatness depends on systems that are less visible than its walls. Irrigation is one of them. Southern Mesopotamia does not reward neglect. If canals silt up, fields fail. If embankments weaken, floods destroy what was meant to nourish. If officials cannot organize labor, prosperity withers. So a city like Babylon is not merely built once. It is maintained every season. Water is inspected, channels cleared, boundaries marked, fields assessed, and rations counted. Thousands of hands preserve what a king claims as his glory. That is true of empires in every age, but in Babylon the truth is especially clear, because the line between survival and collapse is drawn in mud and water. This is part of what gives Babylon its place in the Bible. The prophets of Judah did not speak about a distant fantasy. They spoke about a real imperial center, whose strength could be felt across deserts and trade routes, whose armies crossed borders, whose policies altered lives in Jerusalem and beyond. When Jeremiah warns of Babylon, when 2 Kings recounts the fall of Jerusalem to Babylon, when the opening of Daniel places young Judeans in the Babylonian court, the name points to a city that governed from this watered plain. Babylon is both place and power. The Bible knows it as an empire with armies, officials, storehouses, and kings who believed their reach had been sanctioned by heaven. In 570 BC, the city still carries the force of Nebuchadnezzar's long reign. He has not merely occupied Babylon, he has remade it. His inscriptions, stamped on countless bricks, show a ruler determined to bind his name to the city's material body. The walls, temples, gates, roads, and palaces speak in the language ancient kings preferred. If the gods favor me, the city will shine. If the city shines, my rule appears justified. In that world, beauty is political. Monument is argument. Architecture is theology in fired clay. And yet beneath the official image, there are ordinary rhythms that no empire fully controls. Bakers prepare loaves before dawn. Laborers carry baskets of earth. Scribes smooth clay tablets and press reed styluses into wet surfaces. Merchants argue await delivery and debt. Children learn words in more than one tongue. Akkadian remains a language of culture and learning, while Aramaic circulates widely in daily affairs. Foreigners live here too, some by trade, some by compulsion, some because conquest has brought them into Babylon's orbit. Exiles from many regions do not experience the city in the same way as its native elite. The same gate that promises glory to one man may remind another of loss. That tension matters if we wish to understand Babylon honestly. The city is magnificent, but it is not innocent. Ancient states did not produce splendor without extraction. Their beauty was tied to taxes, forced movement, hierarchy, and fear. Biblical writers saw that clearly, even when they also recognized Babylon as an instrument within a larger divine story. The prophets could speak of Babylon as a rod of judgment, and later as a city that would itself be judged. That double vision is important. It prevents the modern listener from reducing Babylon either to pure villainy or to pure wonder. It was a center of knowledge, law, craftsmanship, and political skill. It was also an imperial machine. To stand at the edge of Babylon in this period, then, is to stand at a meeting point between admiration and unease. The city promises order, it displays wealth, it organizes labor with ruthless intelligence. It gathers memory into archives and ritual into temples, but it also reminds us how fragile human grandeur can be. Every wall requires upkeep, every dynasty requires succession. Every ideology of permanence must one day face death, invasion, neglect, or the slow forgetting of time. Babylon does not know its ending yet. That is part of what makes its heights so moving. We are looking at a city that appears secure, perhaps even eternal, while the seeds of its future vulnerability already lie hidden in the same soil from which its bricks were made. Chapter 2. The king who wrote his name into the city, Nebuchadnezzar, came to the throne in 605 BC, at a moment when Babylon was becoming the dominant power of the region. He was the son of Nabopolassar, the founder of the Neo-Babylonian dynasty, and he inherited both opportunity and burden. Assyria had fallen. Egypt still contested influence in the west. Trade routes, vassal states, and borderlands had to be secured. The new empire would need not only military victory, but visible legitimacy. Nebuchadnezzar proved capable in both realms. He defeated enemies, extended control, and then turned extraordinary energy toward building. Ancient rulers often built to honor gods, to secure memory, and to display strength before their subjects and rivals. Nebuchadnezzar did all three. His surviving inscriptions and the physical record of Babylon's great reconstruction show a king deeply concerned with restoration and enlargement. He rebuilt temples, he paved roads, he strengthened walls, he deepened canals, he expanded palace complexes, he repaired sacred structures linked to Marduk and other deities. This building activity was not a side interest after war, it was part of kingship itself. In Mesopotamian thought, a successful king did not simply conquer, he ordered the world under divine favor. This helps explain why his name appears so often on bricks. To modern eyes that can seem vain, and there is no reason to deny an element of royal self-assertion. But in the ancient Near East, inscriptions also functioned as memory anchors. A king wrote his name into foundations because he wanted future generations, human and divine, to know who restored the city. Brick, in that sense, became a legal and sacred witness. It said, "This ruler did not let the shrines fall. This ruler cared for the gods. This ruler maintained cosmic order." Nebuchadnezzar was not shy about making that claim. The Bible remembers him above all as the king who attacked Judah, captured Jerusalem, and carried many of its leading people into exile. Britannica's summary reflects the broad historical outline preserved both in Babylonian sources and the biblical record. Jerusalem fell first in 597 BC, and after rebellion it was taken again in 587 or 586 BC. For Judah, this was catastrophe. The temple built by Solomon was destroyed. The Davidic monarchy was shattered. Priests, officials, craftsmen, and others were deported. What Babylon called imperial policy, Jerusalem experienced as grief and judgment. This is why Nebuchadnezzar appears in scripture as more than a foreign ruler. He becomes the face of a world-changing disaster. Yet the biblical portrait is not simple. Jeremiah can call Nebuchadnezzar my servant, in the sense that Babylon's king becomes, for a time, an instrument through which judgment falls on Judah. Daniel portrays him as mighty yet limited, exalted yet answerable to the Most High. In Daniel 2 and 4, imperial pride is placed under a higher sovereignty. The great king dreams, boasts, trembles, learns, and in the narrative finally acknowledges that rule belongs ultimately to God. Whether one reads Daniel mainly as court tale, theological narrative, or memory-shaped for a later audience, the effect is striking. Babylonian kingship is real, dazzling and dangerous, but it is not final. In 570 BC, however, Nebuchadnezzar's authority still appears formidable. He has ruled for decades. He has seen campaigns, rebellions, treaties, and tribute. He has likely outlived many enemies. Foreign envoys entering Babylon would not meet an uncertain regime. They would encounter a city carefully staged to communicate endurance. The throne room, the ceremonial avenues, the restored sanctuaries, the scale of the walls, all these are part of a political performance. Kings in the ancient world governed partly by force and partly by controlled imagination. If a ruler could make others feel small before they ever heard him speak, that too was power. But royal splendor in Mesopotamia rested on a delicate ecology of administration. The king depended on governors, generals, priests, scribes, engineers, labor overseers, tax collectors, and canal managers. He depended on seasonal stability, on the movement of grain, on the loyalty or fear of conquered territories, on the willingness of local elites to work within imperial expectations. A great king is never solitary in practice, even when the monuments speak as though he alone built the world. Babylonian kingship was highly centralized in image, yet widely distributed in labor. This matters for biblical reflection as well. When scripture speaks of kings, especially great foreign kings, it often pulls the camera back from their propaganda. Babylon said the king restored order. The exiles asked what kind of order destroys Jerusalem. Babylon celebrated monuments. Psalm 137 remembers weeping by the rivers of Babylon. The empire saw deportation as policy. The displaced saw it as the loss of home, song, and sanctuary. These perspectives do not cancel one another, but they do reveal how power sounds different, depending on where one stands. Nebuchadnezzar's building legacy has also shaped later imagination in another way. Because his reign was marked by so much visible construction, later generations attach to him stories that may not be securely verified, including the famous Hanging Gardens. Some ancient traditions credited him with building them for a wife who longed for greener mountain landscapes. Yet Babylonian texts do not clearly confirm that story, and some modern scholars have suggested the gardens, if they existed in the form later described, may have belonged elsewhere, perhaps in Nineveh. It is wiser to speak carefully. Nebuchadnezzar certainly built on a grand scale. The gardens belong to the realm where memory, admiration, and uncertainty meet. Still, if one wishes to understand why Babylon became such a large figure in biblical and historical imagination, Nebuchadnezzar is impossible to ignore. He did not found Babylon, and he did not invent Mesopotamian civilization, but he concentrated its resources, embellished its sacred center, and turned the city into a statement. Under him, Babylon became not merely the capital of a kingdom, but a theater of empire. That is why later readers could use Babylon as a name for arrogance, captivity, luxury, and worldly power. The city's symbolic force was not accidental. It had been built, brick by brick, by a king who wanted the world to remember. Chapter 3, Through the Gate of Ishtar if Babylon, taught power through architecture. The lesson began before one reached the palace. The city's walls and gates formed a sequence of approach, a controlled movement from outside to inside, from road to ritual space, from provincial dust to imperial meaning. The northern entrance, marked by the Ishtar Gate, became one of the most famous thresholds of the ancient world. Even in ruin, its memory remains strong because it embodied the Babylonian talent for joining religious symbolism, royal display, and urban planning into one coherent experience. The gate honored Ishtar, goddess associated in Mesopotamian tradition with love, warfare, and kingship. Yet the imagery on and around it also involved other sacred creatures and divine references, including bulls linked with Adad and dragon-like Mushhushu creatures associated with Marduk. The point was not random decoration. The gate announced that Babylon was under divine protection and divine order, as the city understood those things. Glazed blue bricks turned an entrance into a luminous surface. Animal forms repeated in measured rhythm gave movement to the wall itself. A person entering here would not simply feel that he had crossed into a wealthy place. He would sense that it entered a sacred political world where heaven, ritual, and kingship had been woven together. The processional way extended that experience. Ceremonial roads in Mesopotamia were not mere practical streets, they were roots of public meaning. During major festivals, especially the New Year festival associated with Marduk, images, priests, officials, and royal figures moved along prescribed paths. The city displayed itself to itself. Order was enacted, not merely claimed. Procession told the people that the gods had not abandoned the center. It also told subject peoples and visiting envoys that Babylon knew how to organize devotion on a grand scale. Where a modern city may reveal itself through markets, factories, and traffic, Babylon revealed its heart through ritual movement. This is one reason biblical readers should linger over cities rather than treating them as background. In the Bible, cities are moral and symbolic environments. Jerusalem has its temple, its royal memory, its songs. Babylon too has a sacred map, a political choreography, a way of shaping the soul through public space. To live in Babylon was to be surrounded by signs. The walls preached. The gates interpreted reality. The roads trained the body to recognize imperial hierarchy. For exiles from Judah, such an environment would have been more than impressive. It could also be spiritually disorienting. Here was another great city, another temple world, another claim about how heaven and earth were joined. At the center of that claim stood Marduk, Babylon's chief deity. His great temple complex, the exile, and the towering ziggurat associated with Etemenanki anchored the city's religious identity. The New Year festival reaffirmed both divine kingship and the earthly king's legitimacy. In some ritual contexts, the king himself was humbled before the god, a reminder that even Babylonian monarchy was not imagined as autonomous. Kings ruled under the patronage of the gods. Their success depended on maintaining cultic order. This arrangement differs sharply from biblical monotheism, but it also reveals something the Bible would understand. Politics and worship were never easily separated in the ancient world. The walls themselves carried meaning beyond defense. Ancient descriptions and archaeology suggest an impressive system of fortification, with inner and outer walls, towers, and moats. In a region where cities could rise on open plains, walls were not optional. They were confidence made visible. But their scale in Babylon also fed the city's aura. If one cannot see the whole city at once, one imagines even more behind the barrier. Magnitude works on the mind. Foreign peoples who heard of Babylon before seeing it likely pictured a place almost beyond ordinary measure. And when they arrived, the city's planned approaches were meant to confirm that impression. Yet these monuments were not frozen art objects. They were used, repaired, traversed, and seen differently by different groups. Priests saw ritual significance, officials saw control, soldiers saw strong points and patrol routes, merchants saw traffic and opportunity, laborers saw tasks of hauling, cleaning, paving, and maintenance. Exiles may have seen a city beautiful enough to wound them, because beauty can intensify the pain of displacement. A captive forced to admire imperial grandeur is placed in a complicated emotional whirl. The city becomes both real and intolerable, fascinating and oppressive. This tension echoes through biblical memory. The Book of Daniel places Judean figures within the structures of Babylonian court life. Psalm 137 remembers song interrupted by exile. Prophetic books speak of Babylon not only as conqueror but as a city destined to fall. That later judgment language can make readers forget that Babylon once seemed stable beyond challenge. The gate, the way, the walls, the temple district, all were designed to make collapse feel impossible. Cities of great self-confidence often create the illusion that their present form is the natural shape of the world. Babylon excelled at this. There is also an irony here that later Jewish and Christian readers would not miss. The city renowned for processional order and monumental gates would, in biblical imagination, become a sign of human pride and imperial overreach. Not because gates are evil or roads are sinful, but because grandeur easily persuades rulers that they are above correction. Public beauty can conceal moral blindness. A kingdom may know how to glaze bricks and still not know how to deal justly with the weak. It may preserve ritual while corrupting the heart. These are not uniquely Babylonian temptations. They are recurring human ones, and that is why Babylon remains more than a chapter in archaeology. To pass through the Ishtar Gate, then, is to enter a city that believed deeply in visible order. Every surface told a story about legitimacy, piety, and permanence. But another story was also present, quieter and more dangerous to imperial confidence. No wall can secure a kingdom against pride, misrule, or time. The gate could control the body's entrance. It could not control history's final verdict. Chapter 4 houses, markets, and the weight of ordinary days city becomes legendary because of towers and palaces. But it lives because of kitchens, workshops, storerooms, contracts, quarrels, births, and funerals. Babylon in 570 BC was not only a ceremonial capital, it was a crowded urban society where daily life unfolded under the shadow of empire. Bread had to be baked, beer had to be brewed, water had to be carried or drawn, textiles had to be woven, animals had to be bought and sold, debts had to be recorded, marriages had to be arranged, illness had to be treated as well as people knew how. Temples dominated the skyline, but households carried the burden of survival. Mesopotamian cities were built from materials suited to their land. Mud brick was common. That meant homes could be practical, enclosed and adapted to heat, but also vulnerable to time and weather if not maintained. Many houses organized life around interior courtyards. Privacy mattered, shade mattered, airflow mattered. Family was not an abstract ideal, but a working social unit. Several generations might remain tied by obligation, property, and honor. Domestic religion, household labor, and economic planning met in the same space. Even among elites, the home was not sealed off from larger systems. Taxes, inheritance, law, and cult reached into family life. Babylonian society was layered. Ancient sources speak of social distinctions that included free persons, dependents, and slaves, though reality on the ground could be more complex than neat categories suggest. Some slaves could own property or engage in transactions. Some free persons could fall into desperate dependency through debt. Social rank affected access, vulnerability, and legal recourse. Yet the city was not composed of only two worlds, rich and poor. It was an intricate hierarchy of status, family connection, occupational role, ethnicity, and relation to temple or crown. A merchant, a scribe, a brewer, a labor overseer, a temple servant, and a deported craftsman might all live in Babylon, but their Babylon was not the same. Women also appear in legal and economic records, in ways that complicate simple assumptions. Babylonian law traditions, including earlier material associated with Hammurabi and later practice, recognized marriage contracts, dowry arrangements, property matters, divorce conditions, and inheritance questions. That did not create equality in a modern sense, and patriarchy was deeply rooted. Yet women were not invisible within the legal economy. Some could own property, manage business affairs, or bring claims. The existence of writes on tablets did not guarantee justice in every case, but the records show a society attentive to formal structure. Life in Babylon was documented because documentation itself was power. The marketplace formed another center of experience. Grain, oil, wool, dates, metal goods, fish, livestock, pottery, and imported items moved through circuits of exchange. Babylon stood within wider networks stretching across the Near East. Trade-linked river routes, caravan paths, provincial centers, and imperial demands. The city consumed the produce of fields and villages far beyond its walls. In return, it offered administration, redistribution, prestige goods, and the opportunities that large urban centers always create. But markets are never only economic spaces. They are places of gossip, rumor, resentment, bargaining, and encounter. People hear news there. They compare prices, complain about officials, notice foreign accents, and test the mood of the city. One of the gifts of cuneiform culture is that it preserves not only royal claims, but ordinary frustrations. Contracts, receipts, letters, complaints, and school exercises survive in clay because clay, once dried or fired, can outlast dynasties. Modern readers sometimes feel a sudden intimacy when encountering these texts. The famous complaint of Nani about poor quality copper comes from a much earlier Mesopotamian world, not 6th century Babylon itself, yet it reminds us how little the human voice changes in some respects. People in ancient Mesopotamia argued about bad goods, damaged trust, and proper treatment. Bureaucracy may seem distant, but annoyance is timeless. Food tells another part of the story. Grain, especially barley, was central. Bread and beer were staples, not luxuries. Beer in Mesopotamia was not simply recreation. It could be part of daily nutrition and rationing. Dates also mattered greatly, as food and as an economic resource. Animals provided meat, though not always in the quantities imagined by modern consumers. Fish from river systems supplemented the diet. A city this large depended on careful supply. Famine or major canal failure was never a theoretical problem. It was a political threat and a social terror. For deported communities, daily life in Babylon involved adaptation without full belonging. The Bible preserves one of the most moving tensions of exile in Jeremiah 29, where the exiles are told to build houses, plant gardens, marry, and seek the welfare of the city where they have been sent. That instruction is realistic and painful. It does not romanticize Babylon, yet it acknowledges duration. Exile may last longer than anger first imagines. Life must continue in a foreign land. This is one of the reasons Babylon became so important in biblical memory. It was not only the place of destruction, it was also the place where displaced people had to learn how to live under judgment without surrendering identity. In that sense, ordinary Babylon was spiritually significant. The deepest crisis of exile was not only military defeat. It was the question of how a people shaped by covenant could remain a people when the temple was gone, the king removed, and another empire arranged the conditions of daily life. In houses and workshops, in family meals and legal transactions, identity had to be renegotiated. The stories later preserved in Daniel about faithful practice in a foreign court belong to this wider problem. How does one live near power without dissolving into it? How does one learn the language of Babylon without forgetting Jerusalem? Those questions were not solved only in moments of drama. They were lived in ordinary days. So when we think of Babylon, it is not enough to see the gate and the tower. We must also hear the millstone, the marketplace, the scratched complaint, the mother instructing a child, the clerk checking a measure of grain, the laborer returning tired at dusk, the exile learning which customs can be tolerated and which must be resisted. Civilizations are remembered by monuments. They are sustained by habits. Babylon had both, and the habits may tell us more about its humanity than the walls ever could. Chapter 5 Tablets, Contracts, and the discipline of law. Babylon was a city of writing. Not everyone could read or compose cuneiform, and literacy in the ancient world was never evenly distributed, but the written record held extraordinary authority. Clay tablets preserved agreements, inventories, legal rulings, loans, correspondence, prayers, omens, scholarly lists, and school exercises. The physical act of pressing a stylus into clay connected economy, law, religion, and memory. A spoken promise might drift, a tablet endured. In a world without paper archives as we know them, without digital systems, without printing presses, Babylon still managed a strikingly disciplined culture of documentation. The scribe occupied an important place in that world. Scribal training required time, skill, and access to schools, often linked to temple or palace institutions. Students copied signs, word lists, legal formulae, and literary texts. Through this discipline, they inherited not only practical tools, but a civilizational memory. To become a scribe was to enter a long tradition. Some texts copied in first millennium Babylon preserved much older Sumerian and Akkadian material. That meant the city did not merely administer the present, it curated the past. A young scribe in Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon could be shaped by voices centuries older than his own dynasty. Law in Babylon was not created from nothing in the 6th century BC. The famous Code of Hammurabi belonged to a much earlier age, already ancient by Nebuchadnezzar's time, but it remained part of Mesopotamia's legal heritage. Modern readers can overstate continuity if they imagine one code functioning unchanged across a millennium. Real legal practice evolves. Still, the existence of older legal traditions mattered. It reflected a civilization that thought deeply about status, property, injury, debt, marriage, inheritance, labor, and public order. Written law and recorded judgment expressed a desire to make social life legible. What did this mean in practice? Contracts regulated sales, leases, loans, partnerships, and labor obligations. Witnesses mattered, seals mattered. Terms had to be clear because disputes were inevitable. In a large imperial city, trust could not depend solely on kinship or personal honor. Formal process became necessary. Written evidence created a framework within which strangers and near strangers could transact. That did not eliminate fraud or abuse, but it allowed the state and its institutions to intervene with some consistency. A city that governs grain, land, labor, and tribute on a large scale requires paperwork, even when the paper is clay. This legal and administrative order contributed to Babylon's strength. Empires do not survive on military fear alone. They endure because records allow continuity beyond any single official. A tax account, a property list, a labor roster, a temple inventory, a canal work assignment. All these make the state think in durable forms. When we speak of Babylonian sophistication, we should not think only of astronomy or monumental architecture. Administrative intelligence is part of the picture. The empire knew how to count, classify, store, and retrieve information. It knew how to make obligations traceable. The Bible stands in an interesting relationship to this world of writing. Israel and Judah also developed scribal cultures, covenant documents, royal records, legal traditions, and prophetic scrolls. But in exile, Judeans encountered an imperial bureaucracy of immense maturity. The Book of Daniel reflects this atmosphere in stylized form: training in the language and literature of the Chaldeans, service at court, interpretation of written signs, decrees sent across provinces. Even if one debates the exact historical shaping of the book, its imagination is grounded in a world where writing and rule are bound together. There is also a theological contrast worth noting. Babylonian law sought stability within a hierarchical social order under many gods. Biblical law, while also ancient, tied social order to covenant with the one God of Israel. In both worlds, law had moral and practical dimensions, yet the center was different. In Babylon, a contract served the functioning of society and the authority of the state. In Israel's scripture, law also spoke of identity, holiness, memory, and redemption. The Sabbath, the care for the stranger, the rhythm of debt and release, the prohibition of idols, all placed law within a narrative of divine relationship. Exiles living in Babylon had to negotiate between these legal worlds every day. That negotiation should not be romanticized. Practical life required participation in foreign systems. One had to buy, sell, lease, arrange, and survive. The prophetic vision of faithfulness in exile did not mean refusing all contact with Babylonian administration. It meant learning how to live in a foreign legal order without surrendering the deepest loyalties of covenant. That is harder than dramatic stories alone suggest. Most faithful endurance takes place in paperwork, patience, restraint, and memory far more than in public confrontation. Clay tablets also reveal something morally sobering. Civilization can become highly organized without becoming righteous. Babylon could keep splendid records and still devastate smaller nations. It could protect property within the city while destroying the sanctuary of another people. It could preserve learned texts and yet feed imperial arrogance. This is one reason the Bible does not simply admire great administration. Human beings may become efficient in injustice. Precision can serve domination as easily as wisdom. The existence of good records does not prove the goodness of a regime. And yet, because Babylon recorded so much, it left behind one of the richest windows into the ancient world. That archive now allows historians to hear beyond royal propaganda. We can glimpse loans, marriages, labor systems, temple economies, and the texture of urban life. In a strange way, Babylon's desire to control memory has made it possible for later generations to study it with sympathy and clarity. The city wanted to preserve itself. It also preserved evidence that reminds us how human it was. Behind every contract stands a person needing land, food, time, or security. Behind every legal formula stands the fear that promises may fail. Thus, the clay tablet becomes one of Babylon's truest emblems. Less dramatic than the Ishtar Gate, less famous than the ziggurat, it nevertheless tells us something essential. Babylon believed that order could be pressed into matter, sign by sign, line by line. It believed the world could be named, tracked, and stabilized. That confidence helped build an empire, but it also reveals a deeper human longing to make life hold together, to resist forgetting, to keep chaos at bay. In that longing, Babylon is not alien to us at all. Chapter 6, Temple, Ziggurat, and the search for heaven at the heart of Babylon stood sacred architecture that joined ritual, cosmology, and political identity. The great temple complex of Esagila, devoted to Marduk, and the towering ziggurat called Etemenanki shaped the city's religious imagination. To later biblical readers, Babylon would be remembered through the story of Babel in Genesis 11, where humanity gathers in Shinar and builds a city and tower in an act associated with pride and confusion. Historians must move carefully here. The biblical story and the historical ziggurat are not the same genre of evidence, but the connection between them has long attracted reflection, and not without reason. Etemenanki, whose name is often rendered along the lines of temple of the foundation of heaven and earth, seems to have been a major Babylonian ziggurat dedicated to Marduk. Later descriptions and modern scholarship suggest impressive dimensions, though the exact form and full history remain debated. National Geographic's summary of current scholarly caution reflects the state of the question well. Many historians see Etemenanki as the leading historical counterpart behind later associations with the Tower of Babel. Yet the archaeological picture is incomplete and certainty is impossible. That restraint matters. Babylon's own grandeur tempts exaggeration, and later imagination magnified it even further. Still, even without forcing certainty, one can understand why a Judean exile or later biblical writer might look at Babylonian temple towers and see a powerful symbol. Ziggurats were not ordinary buildings. They lifted sacred space upward in stages. They suggested an ordered meeting point between the earthly and divine realms. Though not in the simple sense of a staircase, people could casually climb to reach heaven. Rather, They belonged to a ritual world in which gods were honored by elevation, procession, and carefully arranged sanctuary space. The height itself mattered because height in the ancient imagination signaled nearness to the divine and visibility before the land. Babylon's religion was not a private affair. It organized time, kingship, knowledge, and social expectation. Priests oversaw rituals, offerings, interpretation, and temple administration. Temples held economic nobles sacred significance. They could own land, employ workers, store goods, and support scholarly activity. A great temple in Mesopotamia was not only a place of prayer, it was an institution. It helped the city understand itself. Marduk's status in Babylon, especially after the city's rise to imperial prominence, reflected this union of theology and politics. If Marduk stood above the city, Babylon itself could claim centrality within the world. The Bible's response to such a world was not indifferent. Israel's faith also knew temple, priesthood, sacrifice, and sacred calendar. But the first commandment left no room for rival divine centers. When Jerusalem fell and its temple was destroyed, the theological wound was severe, precisely because temple mattered. Exile in Babylon placed worshippers of the God of Israel within the orbit of another temple civilization. Their crisis was not merely emotional homesickness, it was a challenge to covenant identity. Had Marduk triumphed? Had the God of Israel abandoned his people? Prophetic and exilic texts answer by reframing history. Babylon may conquer Jerusalem, but only within limits permitted by the Lord of history. Empires do not settle the question of truth by military success. This is one reason the later association of Babylon with Babel carries such force. Genesis 11 tells of human beings seeking fame, unity, and height through their own project. And the story culminates not in triumph but in scattering. The text itself does not name Etemenanki, nor does it provide archaeology. It offers theological narrative. Yet because the city named in the story is Babel, and because Babylon became for Israel a symbol of concentrated human ambition, later readers understandably saw resonance between the biblical tale and the monumental temple towers of Mesopotamia. The caution historians urge does not cancel the literary power of that connection. It simply reminds us not to confuse suggestive memory with direct proof. Within Babylon itself, of course, the ziggurat signified something different. It was not a monument to rebellion in Babylonian eyes. It was sacred order. The city's patron god was being honored. Ritual was being maintained. The world was being held together through proper worship. Here we encounter one of the deep challenges of studying ancient religion. The same structure can mean hubris to one tradition and devotion to another. Historical understanding requires that we see both, without flattening either. There is also a human dimension beneath the theological claims. Huge sacred buildings require labor on a scale that few individuals can imagine. Bricks must be made, transported, laid, and repaired. Bitumen, reeds, wood, and stone must be gathered or imported. Skilled artisans and ordinary workers alike contribute to a result most will never own. Temple grandeur, like palace grandeur, rests on collective effort harnessed by concentrated authority. The sacred center therefore reveals both aspiration and inequality. People built heavenward, but they did so from the earth, under supervision, under obligation, and often within structures of power they did not control. Yet it would be unfair to treat Babylonian religion only as ideology. Ancient peoples did not generally divide life into neat secular and sacred compartments. The movements of the stars, the fertility of fields, the legitimacy of kings, the onset of illness, the rhythms of feast days, all were interpreted within a religious frame. To a Babylonian priest or worshipper, ritual was not decorative. It was participation in reality as they understood it. This deserves seriousness from the modern narrator, even when one speaks from within biblical categories that ultimately judge Babylon's gods as idols. The ziggurat, then, stands at the center of several intersecting stories. It is a Babylonian sacred monument. It is a likely historical echo in later reflection on Babel. It is an emblem of imperial religion. It is an object of archaeological debate. It is a reminder that human beings have always tried to arrange the world in ways that bridge fragility and transcendence. Babylon did this with terraces, ritual, and brick. The Bible responds by insisting that heaven is not reached by human height, and that the true Lord of history is not contained in the systems empires build. In that contrast, the tower becomes more than architecture. It becomes a question about where human beings believe ultimate order truly comes from. Chapter 7. The palace, the court, and the education of exile. If the temple expressed Babylon's sacred center, the palace expressed its political will. Nebuchadnezzar's southern palace, with its courts, reception spaces, storerooms, administrative rooms, and grand throne setting, was more than a royal residence. It was a machine for hierarchy. Movement through its spaces taught people where they stood. Outer courts admitted many. Inner areas narrowed access. Decoration intensified as one approached the seat of power. Foreign envoys, tribute bearers, military officials, and subject rulers were meant to feel the structure before they heard a word from the king. In the ancient Near East, the court was a place of danger as much as honor. Advancement depended on favor, skill, and caution. One wrong word could end a career. One rumor could undo years of service. The king's nearness might elevate a man, but it could also expose him. Court life demanded adaptation to protocol, language, and symbol. That is part of why the opening chapter of Daniel is so plausible in atmosphere, even when readers differ over questions of composition and historical detail. Young Judeans taken into the orbit of Babylonian power would indeed face education, renaming, dietary pressure, and the temptation or necessity of service within a foreign regime. Daniel 1 describes certain exiles being trained in the literature and language of the Chaldeans. However, one dates the final form of that text. It captures a genuine imperial pattern. Conquest did not only move bodies, it also sought useful minds. An empire benefited from talented foreigners who could be instructed, absorbed, and redeployed. Cultural training was therefore political. To master Babylonian learning could mean opportunity, but also assimilation. The names, stories, categories, and expectations of the empire pressed upon the displaced. The court became a school in how power reshapes identity. This is why the biblical stories of Daniel and his companions remain so compelling. Their tension is not merely miraculous, it is human. What may one accept from Babylon, and what must be refused? Can one serve in an imperial administration without worshipping the empire's gods? Can wisdom learned in a foreign system be used faithfully? The text does not resolve those questions by simple withdrawal. Daniel and his companions do not vanish into the desert. They remain in service, but they draw lines. Food, prayer, interpretation, and worship become points where inner loyalty is tested. Historically, exilic life was broader than a few gifted court figures. Many Judeans would never stand in royal halls. Yet the court stories give concentrated form to a problem faced by the whole displaced community. Exile educates. It forces adaptation. It rewards compromise. It punishes visible difference. Some changes are survivable. Others strike at the center of covenant life. In this sense, Daniel's Babylon is not only a location, it is a spiritual environment in which memory must contend with prestige. The palace itself would have reinforced that pressure. Luxurious materials, glazed surfaces, carved decoration, guarded entries, and choreographed audiences communicated inevitability. Here was a king who had defeated nations. Here were officials managing lands far beyond the horizon. Here was a state that could uproot peoples and still speak of order. To a young exile from Judah, where the temple had fallen and royal institutions lay in ruins, such a court might seem to embody the future. The danger was not only fear, it was admiration. Empires often gain their deepest hold when the conquered begin to believe that resistance is not only costly but outdated. Daniel's narratives answer that seduction by reframing wisdom itself. Babylon boasts of sages, magicians, diviners, and learned men. Yet in the stories, true interpretation comes from God. Dreams that terrify the king are unveiled not by imperial expertise alone, but by revelation. The message is not anti-learning in a crude sense. Daniel is portrayed as educated and skillful. Rather, the text insists that knowledge detached from the true God cannot master history's meaning. Babylon may read stars and preserve traditions, but it cannot secure the future by technique. Nebuchadnezzar's own portrayal in Daniel 4 sharpens the lesson. He surveys his kingdom and takes pride in Great Babylon, as though its glory were self-generated. Then comes humbling. The narrative uses vivid symbolic language to expose a universal political temptation. Rulers confuse stewardship with ownership, and success with self-deification. Whether one reads the account as precise court memoir, theological tale, or something shaped across memory and retelling, its insight remains powerful. Monumental states produce monumental ego. The higher the palace rises, the easier it becomes to forget that breath itself is a gift. There is also a quieter tragedy in all this. Courts attract gifted people precisely because they concentrate possibility. Education, patronage, influence, and access gather there. The exile who learns Babylonian letters or serves in administration is not always a coward or opportunist. Sometimes he is simply trying to survive, or to serve wisely where he has been placed. The Bible itself leaves room for faithful service under foreign rule. Joseph serves in Egypt, Daniel serves in Babylon and beyond, Esther serves in Persia. The question is never only where one stands, but whom one ultimately fears and obeys. Thus, the Palace of Babylon becomes a profound setting for biblical reflection. It is a place where architecture magnifies power, where language becomes a test of belonging, where education can become assimilation, and where gifted people must learn the difference between usefulness and surrender. In 570 BC, the palace still stands as one of the crowning achievements of Nebuchadnezzar's vision. But from the perspective of Scripture, it is also a classroom in impermanence. Kings speak as though they rule history. The biblical witness replies that even the mightiest court remains a passing chamber beneath the sovereignty of God.